everything, that's how the light gets in. Someone once said, I quite like this picture, that to show up with a silk pyjama on a construction site is somehow out of place. It keeps one's distance. And I think life is an ongoing construction site. Because whenever we think that from now on everything remains the way we originally planned it, and sometimes, of course, we have moments where we experience that way, now, finally, that's how it should be. But over time, sometimes quite soon, sometimes a little bit later, things change. Something unpredicted happens. Sometimes it's obvious the conditions that made it change, and very often they're not obvious. They can't be recognized by our senses. Why? Now everything was just fine. Why did this change the way it did? So when we are deeply connected with our own difficulties, but can also acknowledge that there are experiences in life that are difficult to bear, without someone to be blamed for it, we then also experience that compassion helps to soothe this pain, and that aversion makes the difficult even more unbearable. So we get more acquainted with the sources of our suffering, but through that also with the sources of its relief and its ending. And the wish to manifest this wisdom by helping to diminish suffering wherever it manifests gets stronger. There's a text by the Dalai Lama where he says, "We are guests on this planet. In the best case, we are here for 80 to 100 years. During this time, we should try to do something good, useful with our life. Try to be at peace with yourself and help others share this peace. When you contribute to the happiness and welfare of others, you will find the true purpose, the true meaning of your life." So in a way it is rather strange. The root of more suffering lies in the determination to stay closed to the very suffering. And the root of the alleviation or the ending of suffering lies in the willingness, the courage, of course, that it also takes to open to the existing suffering. So we train, we exercise our heart muscle. I don't think it can really get lost, but it can atrophy. You say atrophy? That's right. Atrophy. It can recede, it can become less strong. The heart can become harder, I think. It can more often be closed down, depending on what kind of seed we sow. Whether we plant more often discontent or resentment, appreciation or kindness or compassion. And I'd like again to read a story that I find quite touching, I like a lot. It's by Father Theophane, And Father Theophane, he was a Trappist monk, which means he was monk in the Christian tradition. Also, as I've been told, he did some also silent retreats in the Buddhist center of the Insight Meditation Society in the States, because his monastery was nearby. And Father Theophane, during that time, he also met Dipama, who was an Indian woman, a very great, wise, compassionate practitioner, who also visited this very Buddhist center in the States. So they met together, and apparently Father Theophane was quite touched and impressed by this little Indian woman called Dipama, the great practitioner. And after her death, he wrote this text. What is your heart like? That's what they wanted to know. They brought in someone who had just died. They proceeded to open up her heart. You wouldn't believe what was in there. You wouldn't believe it. White people, black people, atheists, rich people, poor people, drunkards, prostitutes, priests, politicians, children, judges, baseball players, cranks, which is in German komische Kreuze, and me, even me. How did I get there? Is that what I will be like when I die? When they open my heart, what will they find? There's an anecdote by Suzuki Roshi, a Zen master, quite famous, who founded, for example, San Francisco Zen Center or Tassajara or a Green Gulch Farm that some of you might know. And apparently someone who worked in his kitchen in one of his centers went to see Suzuki Roshi in order to complain about other helpers who, according to this guy's view, were too talkative in the kitchen. And Suzuki's answer to that complaint was, if you want a quiet kitchen, calm your own mind. So it really means if we don't change, we might not even notice that others did change. So we cultivate these qualities among many others, of course, because I think the fabric that we need in order for wisdom really and compassion to grow, of course, is a very lively fabric which consists of many, many other qualities that we cultivate and strengthen in ourselves. But in doing that, in cultivating those qualities, by learning to stay present. Here on a retreat, in a way, it's also learning to stay present outwardly, but much more important, of course, to stay present inwardly. So in a way, when we do what we do here, when we sit, when we walk, all these hours on end here, then we sit and walk in this space between expression and repression. In a way, it's like stopping to look stopping to look for answers or for a solution. And often we are searching for solutions, of course. Just one example, perhaps. Sometimes something happens that we don't like, aversion arises in our mind, and habitually we look for a solution of this unpleasant experience. Either we try to fight against the aversion, or we try to get rid of the person or the situation that triggered our anger. And here we learn to stay present with the aversion itself. We let go of the thoughts about the aversion. We stay, or we learn to stay with the raw, the naked quality of aversion, the felt sense of this experience, the non-conceptual energy, perhaps, of it. And we don't try to manipulate the content or the circumstances. And we also bring our attention to the vessel in which this experience happens. We allow the vessel to be spacious, patient, open, which then allows for the empty, transparent, or ungraspable nature of aversion to become apparent. And this really is true for all experiences. Whether they are pleasant or unpleasant, wanted or unwanted, whenever the vessel, the mind, our heart is narrow, when we are trying to hold on to, or we're trying to get rid of its content, be this content aversion or jealousy, be it joy or calm, it very much appears in those moments to be very solid, very permanent, very reliable. Of course, also the pleasant experience seemed that way. In those moments it seems like, oh, what's the problem? It will stay like that. Finally, I have it, I got it. That's how it should stay forever. So it's very much my experience also in this moment, my aversion, my calm. And through that, of course, it doesn't stay there usually. There's a lot of entanglement again happening from that. And here's a true story that Kittisaro, who used to be a Buddhist monk, and that was his Buddhist monk's name, which he is still carrying, although he's a layperson now. When he was still a monk, he told me he used to go and visit prisons, actually visit prisoners, not prisons, in prisons, and teach meditation to those of them who were interested, and they were and still are quite a number of them very much interested in this kind of practice. So he said one time, after he had done a guided metta, loving kindness meditation with these really tough guys, some of them who were in prison, also for murder. So after this one of these guided metta, loving kindness meditation, one of the men, quite a big tough guy, he came out and talked to him, and he said, I want you to know that I have no compassion or, loving kindness. If I were to meet that fellow now, I would kill him again.